Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going somewhere that most people, well, hopefully most of you listening, will never have to see from the inside.
Let's hope not.
Right. We're going past the sliding doors of the ER. We're going past the sterile scrubbing stations of the operating theater. And we are heading down into the basement.
Deep into the basement.
Yeah, into those windowless rooms where the air conditioning is just always set to Arctic and the hum of the centrifuges literally never stops.
It really is the engine room of the hospital.
Exactly, the engine room. We are talking about the blood bank. And specifically, we're looking at a high-stakes, high-adrenaline standoff that happens down there a lot more often than you'd think.
It does. It happens all the time. You know, I think people tend to view the blood bank as a sort of like a vending machine.
Well, totally. You just press a button.
Right. You put in a request, a bag of blood comes down the chute, and you move on with your day. But the reality is, it's this highly complex biological pharmacy. It's a place of rigorous testing and absolute precision.
And when things go wrong in that room, they go wrong incredibly fast.
Very fast.
So today's deep dive is based on a really fascinating piece of source material from Sharif Abdelman. He's the founder of Immunohematology Made Easy. And the piece is titled Blood Compatibility Myths in Transfusion Medicine. And honestly, reading through this thing, it plays out like a medical thriller.
It really does. It captures that very specific friction between the clinical side, so the doctors upstairs trying to save a life, and the laboratory side, which is the scientists downstairs desperately trying to prevent a disaster.
So let's set the scene for the listener here, because this isn't just some textbook hypothetical. This deep dive actually starts with a real message that Sharif received from a colleague.
A very panicked message, usually.
Right. Imagine this. You are on the night shift in the lab. It's quiet. It's maybe 2 a.m. And suddenly the red phone rings.
Never a good sound.
Never.
Yeah.
You have a patient upstairs who is bleeding out. They need blood, and they need it right now.
This is what we call a massive transfusion protocol scenario. The patient is losing volume faster than their body can possibly replace it, so every single second counts.
Every second. So you do your job. You run to the shelf, you grab units of blood, and you start testing them against the patient's sample. You're looking for a match. You're looking for that safe green light so you can set it upstairs.
And this is where the nightmare really begins.
Yeah. You test the first bag, incompatible. You test the second bag, incompatible. You grab 10 more bags off the shelf, all incompatible. The source describes this as absolutely no compatibility found.
Just pause there for a second, because for a listener who isn't in medicine, I really want to explain what that feels like.
Please do.
You are holding the only thing that can save this patient's life. Literally, the physical fuel they need to keep their heart pumping. But your tests are telling you that if you put this blood into their body, it might kill them faster than the actual bleeding.
It's a total paradox.
It's terrifying. The patient's immune system is essentially on total lockdown. It's just screaming, I will attack anything you put inside me.
Right. So now you have to make the call. You have to pick up the phone and tell the treating physician, who, by the way, is probably covered in blood, totally stressed out of his mind, and watching a heart monitor flatline.
Yeah.
You have to tell him that you have nothing for him.
And this is the hook of our entire deep dive today.
Because the doctor doesn't accept that answer.
Yeah.
He pushes back. He says, look, I don't care about the test results right now. Why don't you just process the units? Just wash them and filter them.
Just wash it.
Just wash it. And it sounds so logical, right? I mean, if I drop an apple in the mud, I wash it before I eat it.
Exactly.
If my tap water is murky, I put a filter on it. The doctor is effectively saying to the lab tech, clean this blood up so my patient can take it.
It's an incredibly common request. The source actually mentions that this isn't some isolated incident. They hear this from colleagues all the time. It's this deep, intuitive belief that incompatibility is just a form of contamination that we can sort of scrub away.
But the mission of today's deep dive is to explain exactly why that intuition is dead wrong. We are going to unpack what Sharif calls the myth of processing. We're going to look at why you cannot wash, filter, or irradiate your way out of a genetic mismatch.
We're going to have to get a bit microscopic today.
We are.
We need to talk about antigens, antibodies, and the physical, literal architecture of a cell. Because if you don't understand the structure, you won't understand why the fix completely failed.
So buckle up. We are going to debunk 4 specific myths that even very smart, highly experienced doctors believe. And we're going to learn why, as the source implies, you simply cannot negotiate with biology.
Biology has strict rules, and it does not care how desperate this situation upstairs is.
Let's start with section 1, the basics of the battle. Before we can understand why washing the blood doesn't work, we really have to understand what we are actually testing for. When you say a unit of blood is incompatible, what is actually happening inside that tiny test tube?
That's a great question. So the fundamental rule of the human immune system is self versus non-self.
Self versus non-self.
Right. Your immune system is basically a very paranoid security guard. It has a detailed catalog of everything that makes up you. If it sees something that isn't on that list, it attacks. It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't hesitate.
Okay, so it's a completely binary system, friend or foe.
Precisely. Now, in transfusion medicine, the attacker in this scenario is the antibody. These are proteins floating around in the patient's plasma. Think of them as heat-seeking missiles patrolling the bloodstream.
And what are these missiles targeting?
They are targeting antigens. An antigen is just a marker. It's a physical structure on the surface of a cell. In this case, the donor's red blood cell.
I love analogies, so let's try to build one out here to make this really stick for the listener. I want you to imagine that the patient's body is an extremely exclusive, high-security nightclub.
I like it. Velvet ropes, flashing lights, massive guys standing at the door.
Exactly. The antibodies are those bouncers. And these aren't just generic security guards. They have a very specific hit list. They are holding photos of people who are permanently banned from the club.
That is actually a perfect description of what we call an allantibody.
An allayed antibody.
Yes, it's an antibody specific to a foreign target. It's looking for one very specific thing and nothing else.
Okay, so the donor, the bag of blood we desperately want to transfuse, that's a line of people standing outside trying to get into the club. The red blood cells are the guests in line.
Right.
And the antigens, those are the clothes they're wearing.
Yes. Let's say the antigen is a bright red shirt.
Okay, so the bouncer, our antibody, has a photo of a guy in a red shirt. His orders from the boss are, if you see anyone wearing a red shirt, destroy them.
Agglutinate them, strictly speaking.
Agglutinate. That sounds painful.
It is. That's the technical term for it. When the antibody finds the antigen, it latches onto it. But antibodies are Y-shaped. They have two hands.
Oh, I see.
So they grab one red cell with the left hand, and then they grab another red cell with the right hand, and they pull them together.
Almost like a magnet.
Exactly like a magnet. And then they grab another one, and it creates this massive clump, a clot.
So in our nightclub analogy, the bouncer isn't just stopping the guy in the red shirt. He's handcuffing him to the next guy in a red shirt, and then to the next guy, until you have this giant pile of bodies just blocking the door.
That is exactly what we see in the test tube in the lab. When we mix the patient's serum with the donor cells, if we see that clumping, that agglutination, that is a positive crossmatch.
Positive meaning bad in this case.
Very bad. It means the bouncer found the red shirt. It means absolute incompatibility. And inside the human body, that clumping leads to mass destruction. The cells literally burst open.
Okay, so we have the mechanism down. The patient, our bouncer, absolutely hates the donor, our guy in the red shirt. Now let's go back to our desperate doctor upstairs. He is staring at this incompatible lab result. He sees the clumping in the tube, or at least he reads the report saying it clumped. He says, fine, wash the blood, filter the blood.
He thinks he can trick the bouncer.
The source material breaks down 3 specific procedures that doctors often confuse with compatibility fixes. We need to walk through these in detail because I think a lot of us have heard these terms like washed red cells or irradiated blood, but we don't actually know what happens to the bag of blood.
Right. These are very standard procedures. We do them every single day in the blood bank, but they are highly specific tools for very specific jobs.
So procedure number 1, washing. What does it actually look like to wash a unit of blood? I mean, are we using soap?
No soap, no sponges. It is all about saline and centrifugal force.
Okay, walk me through it.
Here's the actual process. We take the bag of red blood cells, we pour in a large amount of sterile saline, which is basically just clean salt water. Then we put that bag into a centrifuge.
That's the machine that spins around really fast, right?
Incredibly fast, thousands of revolutions per minute. This spinning creates artificial gravity, a high G-force. Now, because red blood cells are heavy, remember, they're packed full of iron, they get pushed all the way to the very bottom of the bag.
They sink.
Exactly. They pack down tight, almost like sediment at the bottom of a river.
And what happens to the liquid?
The liquid, which includes the donor's plasma, the added saline, any stray proteins, that all stays on top because it's lighter. We call that top layer the supernatant. We basically squeeze that liquid out of the bag and throw it in the trash.
Got it.
Then we add more clean saline to the cells, mix it all up, and spin it again. We usually do this whole process 3 times.
So it's literally a rinse cycle. You are rinsing the cells repeatedly.
Exactly. Now, pay very close attention to what is actually being removed here. We are removing the liquid surrounding the cells. We are washing away the plasma. We are washing away any of the donor's own antibodies. We are washing away loose proteins just floating around in the juice.
Going back to our nightclub, the line of people with the red blood cells is standing there. Washing them is like, I don't know, hosing them down with a fire hose.
Yes, you are blasting them with water. You're washing off the mud on their shoes. You're washing off their heavy cologne. You're washing off the sweat. You are cleaning the environment around the person.
Okay, hold that thought because we're going to come back to it. Procedure number 2, filtering. The fancy medical word in the source is leukoreduction.
Leukoreduction. Leuko means white. So we are reducing the white blood cells. See, a standard whole blood donation isn't just red cells. It's a complex soup. You have red cells, platelets, plasma, and white blood cells.
And white blood cells are the donor's own immune system, right?
Exactly. And generally speaking, we really don't want those. The donor's immune cells can cause fevers in the patient receiving them. They can also carry viruses like CMV cytomegalovirus, which actually live specifically inside those white cells, so we want to filter them out.
How does that filter actually work? Is it just a tiny sieve?
Basically, yes. It's a physical mesh, but the engineering behind it is pretty clever. Red blood cells are these amazing, highly flexible little biconcave discs.
They look like donuts without the hole punched all the way through.
Perfect description. And because they're so flexible, they can fold in half, they can squish through tiny capillaries in your eyes, so they slide right through the tiny holes in the mesh of our filter.
They're slippery.
Very slippery. But white blood cells, they are big, they are rigid, and they are inherently sticky, so they get caught in the filter mesh like flies trapped in a spider web.
So back to the club analogy. The security guard walks down the line of people waiting to get in, and he is looking for other security guards from a rival club who are trying to sneak in.
Perfect. He spots them, grabs them, and pulls them out of the line. You out. You out. So now the line outside the club is just the civilians, just the red cells.
Got it. And finally, procedure number 3, irradiation. This one sounds the most sci-fi to me. Are we nuking the blood?
In a very highly controlled way, yes. We put the bag of blood into a machine that exposes it to gamma rays or X-rays. About 25 gray is the standard dose.
What exactly is the target of the radiation?
We are targeting DNA, specifically the DNA of the T lymphocytes.
What are those?
Those are the special forces of the white blood cells. If we don't zap them and we put them into a patient who has a very weak immune system, like a leukemia patient or a premature baby, those donor T cells can actually wake up inside the new body.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They look around, realize they are in a foreign environment, and they start attacking the patient from the inside out.
That's graft versus host disease.
Yes. And it is horrific. It is almost 100% fatal. So we irradiate the blood to completely scramble the DNA of those donor T cells. They can't divide anymore. They can't attack. They're completely neutralized.
So in the nightclub analogy, the security guard uses let's say a sci-fi stun ray to zap any rival agents hiding in the line. They're still physically standing there in the line, but they are asleep. They can't start a fight inside the club.
Effectively, yes. They are biologically inert at that point.
Okay, so let's quickly recap the fixes the desperate doctor upstairs is asking for. Washing is hosing down the people in line to remove the dirt and cologne, the plasma. Filtering is pulling out the rival bouncers, the white cells. And irradiation is stun-gunning the special forces, the T cells.
All of which are extremely useful procedures. All of which are absolutely vital for patient safety in very specific medical contexts.
But do any of them solve the problem of the guy wearing the red shirt?
And here's the million-dollar question. This brings us right to the absolute core of Sharif's argument in the source material.
Which moves us perfectly into section 2. The core scientific reality. The doctor believes that if he washes and filters the blood, the incompatibility, our guy in the red shirt, will somehow just disappear. Why is he so wrong?
He is wrong because of simple geography. We have to look at where the antigen actually is. Remember, the bouncer hates the red shirt. In human biology, the specific thing causing this massive incompatibility is not just floating around in the water. It's not a piece of dirt resting on the skin. It is an integral part of the cell membrane itself.
Integral part. What does that actually mean physically?
It means it is permanently anchored. It's like a structural steel beam holding up a building. Or, staying with our analogy, it's like an embroidery permanently stitched into the fabric of the shirt. Or a tattoo deeply inked into the skin. The antigen is the cell surface. It sticks out like a rigid flag.
So let's look at our washing procedure again. You take the fire hose, You hose down the guy wearing the red shirt, you wash off the dirt, you wash off the sweat, you wash off the cologne. Does his shirt change color?
No, the water just runs right over it. The shirt is still red, the bouncer still sees red.
Okay, what about filtering? You go into the line and you pull out the big, heavy guy standing next to him. Does that change the color of his shirt?
No, he's standing there all by himself now, but he's still wearing a bright red shirt.
Irradiation. You zap him with x-rays. Did that change his clothes?
No, the radiation passes right through the red shirt and leaves it completely unchanged.
This is the critical takeaway right here. The myth of processing is this flawed belief that you can somehow change the fundamental identity of the cell by cleaning the environment around the cell.
That's it. That's the bottom line. You can clean the package all you want, but you cannot change the contents inside. Sharif uses this great, very stark logic in the source. He says if the patient is incompatible, they remain incompatible regardless of washing. It is an absolute binary state.
It reminds me of another analogy we briefly touched on earlier before we started recording, the license plate analogy.
Yes. Let's expand on that one because I think it really drives the point home for people. Imagine you have a car. The car represents our red blood cell. The license plate bolted to the front, that is the antigen. It's the ID number of the car.
Okay. And the police, which represent the patient's antibodies, are looking for a stolen car with the license plate ABC123.
Right. So you take the stolen car to the car wash. You thoroughly scrub all the mud off the bumper. That represents washing the blood. You vacuum all the old French fries and trash out of the back seat. That represents filtering. You maybe even go in and disable the GPS tracker under the dash. That's irradiation. So now the car is gleaming. It smells like fresh pine. It is literally the cleanest car on the road. But when you drive that gleaming car past the police officer, what does he actually see? He sees license plate ABC123.
You're getting pulled over immediately.
You're getting pulled over, guns drawn. Because the license plate is physically bolted to the steel frame of the car. The cleanliness of your windshield doesn't change your registration number?
So the doctor's frantic request on the phone, just wash it, is functionally useless for fixing the actual incompatibility.
It's actually worse than useless. It's a massive distraction. You are spending 45 minutes washing a unit of blood, tying up a skilled laboratory technician, using up an expensive centrifuge, and deliberately delaying care for a patient who is actively bleeding to death, only to eventually hand the doctor a bag of blood that is still going to cause a massive, potentially fatal reaction.
Which really begs the question, if the underlying biology is this clear, if it's really as simple as the shirt is still red, why do so many highly educated doctors insist on doing it?
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is, and the source actually identifies 4 specific mindsets or psychological traps that physicians fall into when they're facing this. And I think this is where our deep dive gets really interesting because we're moving out of pure biology and into the psychology of a crisis.
Absolutely. It's the psychology of pure desperation. When a physician is backed into a corner and their patient is dying, they start to subconsciously bargain with reality.
Let's break down these 4 mindsets because I bet our listeners will recognize this exact pattern of thinking from their own jobs, even if they don't work anywhere near a hospital. Mindset number 1. The source calls this the misconception of the false positive. I like to call it the magic wand.
Right. This is the doctor who essentially believes the lab test is just wrong.
Walk us through that specific logic.
So the lab report prints out and it says incompatible. The doctor looks at it and thinks, well, maybe it's not really incompatible.
Yeah.
Maybe the lab machine is just reacting to some junk floating in the plasma. Maybe it's reacting to the chemical preservatives in the bag. Maybe the testing instrument is just being overly sensitive today. If we just wash the blood, we remove all that junk, and the test will magically turn green.
They think the alarm bell is just a computer glitch.
Exactly. They think the incompatibility is a false signal caused by dirt, so they deeply believe that washing acts like a magic wand that will literally transform a positive crossmatch into a negative crossmatch.
But as we just proved with the red shirt analogy,
It's entirely impossible. If the test is designed to detect the red shirt, which is the antigen, and washing doesn't remove the red shirt, you can wash that blood 10 times. You can wash it 20 times. The test will still be glaringly positive. The lab tech is going to wash the cells, run the chemical test all over again, look under the microscope, and see the exact same big, ugly, undeniable clump of destroyed cells. Absolutely nothing changes.
It's such a dangerous mindset because it requires you to deny the reality of the data right in front of you.
Hmm.
It assumes the scientific instrument is flawed rather than accepting that the patient's situation is dire.
Correct. It's a form of clinical denial. The computer must be wrong, because if the computer is right, I'm out of options.
Now, mindset number 2 is a little bit more nuanced. The source describes this as essentially the safety net theory.
This one is tricky because this doctor actually admits that the test is going to stay positive. They'll say, look, I know the paperwork will still say incompatible. I know you can't magically change the test result, but I just feel like if we wash it, the patient's actual body won't react as badly.
Wait, so they think the lab test is lying? Or that the human body is just more forgiving than a test tube?
They think that by purifying the physical product, they are creating some kind of biological buffer. They think, okay, it's the wrong blood type, effectively, but if it's really clean, wrong blood, maybe the immune system will give us a pass. Maybe it just won't notice the mismatch.
It's like they're saying, well, it's organic, artisan, hand-washed, incompatible blood.
Yes, exactly. But the immune system does not care about artisan. It only cares about self versus non-self. Sharif has a pretty brutal rebuttal for this specific mindset in the text. He uses a logical proof that I just absolutely love. He says, if washing prevented immune reactions, no one would ever bother with cross-matching.
Oh, wow. That is a total mic drop argument.
Think about the pure economics of a hospital for a second. Cross-matching blood is really hard. It requires highly paid specialized scientists. It requires very expensive chemical reagents. It takes a lot of time. Washing, on the other hand, is incredibly cheap. It's literally just salt water and a spin in a centrifuge. If washing actually made incompatible blood safe,
Then the blood bank would just be a giant laundromat.
we would just wash every single bag that comes in the delivery door and hand it out to literally anyone who needs it. We wouldn't need to type blood into ABO. We wouldn't need to screen for complex antibodies. We'd have a perfect universal supply. The entire scientific field of immunohematology would cease to exist overnight.
The mere fact that your job exists proves that this theory is completely wrong.
Exactly. The whole global transfusion system is built on the hard fact that washing does not work.
And we have to be really precise here. The source makes a distinction that is crucial for our listeners to understand, because washing does prevent some types of reactions.
Yes, it does. If the patient is highly allergic to donor plasma proteins, washing fixes that completely. If the patient gets severe shivering fevers from donor white cells, filtering fixes that completely.
Right.
But the hemolytic transfusion reaction,
That's the big one.
that's the massive one. The one where the immune system shreds the red blood cells and causes organ failure. That is caused solely by the antigen. And as we've said over and over, you cannot wash the antigen. So yes, washing prevents the itchy allergic rash. It prevents the temporary fever. It does not prevent the massive kidney failure.
You're preventing a tiny fender bender in the parking lot, but you're completely ignoring the head-on collision on the highway.
That's a great way to visualize it. You're carefully polishing the hood of a car that is currently driving off a cliff.
That leads perfectly into mindset 3, the severity reduction theory. This really feels like the bargaining phase of grief.
It really does. The doctor in this phase says, okay, fine, I accept reality. A hemolytic reaction is going to happen. The antibodies are going to attack the donor cells. But surely if we wash it and filter it first, the resulting reaction will be milder, right? Maybe the patient just gets a little bit sick instead of dying on the table.
It feels like common sense. Less foreign stuff in the bag equals a lesser reaction in the body.
But the source gives a definitive, absolute no to this.
Why? Why doesn't it help even just a little bit?
Because of the specific way the immune system fights this battle. A hemolytic reaction is not a linear one-to-one thing. It's not like one antibody politely walks up and kills one single red cell. It is an explosive cascade. It triggers something inside the body called the complement system.
The complement system. That sounds very polite. Like, oh, you look very nice today, Mr. Red Blood Cell.
I know, the name is deceptive. It is anything but polite. It's more like completing the absolute destruction. When an antibody binds to a red cell antigen, it lights a chemical fuse. The complement system is a series of proteins floating in your blood that suddenly snap together to form a drill. Literally, it's called a membrane attack complex.
Membrane attack complex. That sounds like a military weapon.
It acts like one. It physically punches massive holes through the cell wall.
Wow.
And when that red cell bursts open, it violently releases toxic chemicals that signal the body to create even more inflammation. It's a biological avalanche. It's a bomb going off in the bloodstream.
And the fuse for that bomb is attached directly to the red blood cell itself.
Right there on the antigen. It does not matter how incredibly clean the salt water around the cell is. The explosion happens at the surface of the cell. The immune system destroys the cell, spills all that free hemoglobin directly into the bloodstream, which is highly toxic to the kidneys, triggers systemic shock, and causes a nightmare called disseminated intravascular coagulation, where the patient's blood basically starts clotting and bleeding at the exact same time everywhere in their body.
That sounds absolutely terrifying.
It is the ultimate medical nightmare. It's rapid multi-organ failure. So whether that donor cell was washed 3 times or 0 times, the antigen is the trigger, and the antigen is still sitting right there. The avalanche simply does not care if the snow was clean before it started falling.
So having quote-unquote cleaner blood doesn't stop the immune system from pulling the trigger at all.
Not even a fraction of a percent. It is a completely binary event. Match or mismatch. Safe or lethal, you cannot be a little bit incompatible in this specific context.
This brings us to the fourth and final mindset. And this one's pretty tricky. The source calls it the isolation of complications strategy.
Yes. Now, this is the physician who actually knows the underlying science very well. They aren't confused about how antigens work. They read the same medical textbooks we did.
Wait, so they already know washing won't fix the incompatibility?
Yes. They know for a fact that the hemolytic reaction, the massive crash we just described, is absolutely inevitable.
Then why on earth would they ask you to wash the blood? That seems entirely counterintuitive.
Because they are actively trying to manage a chaotic crisis. Their internal thinking is, look, I am about to willingly give this patient incompatible blood because they are bleeding to death, and I literally have no other choice. They are absolutely going to have a hemolytic reaction. But I don't want them to also have a random allergic reaction to plasma or a random fever from donor white cells on top of it.
They want to clear the deck.
Exactly. They want to eliminate all the minor variables. They want to strip away all the background noise, the minor itching, the shivering, the hives, so that when the patient's vitals crash, they know for a 100% fact that it is the hemolysis, and they can focus all their attention and drugs on managing that one specific, massive disaster.
The source quotes it as, "Let's be busy with only one thing."
That's the exact quote. And truthfully, from a pure crisis management perspective, you can almost understand the cold logic of it. It's kind of the House MD approach to medicine. Remove all the noise so you can clearly see the real signal.
But the source notes that this effectively means the doctor is making a conscious decision to issue uncross-matched blood.
Yes, and this is a massive ethical and legal hurdle in any hospital. If a doctor officially does this, they are effectively signing a waiver. They are saying, I am taking full personal and professional responsibility for intentionally giving incompatible blood. They are forcefully overriding the built-in safety protocols of the blood bank.
And does the lab just agree to this? Do you just say, okay, here you go?
It really depends on the specific facility's policy. The source actually mentions that dealing with uncross-matched blood is a completely different conversation. It's not a medical fix for compatibility, it's a desperate clinical strategy. But here's the massive rub, and this is why the source is so deeply skeptical of even this approach. Washing and filtering take a lot of time.
Right. It's not an instant push-button thing. We talked about that whole centrifuge process.
If you are washing multiple units, that can take 30, 45 minutes, maybe even an hour, depending on your exact lab equipment and how many units they need. Now, if the patient is actively bleeding out right now, which is literally the only reason you would ever even consider giving incompatible blood, do you really have 45 spare minutes to sit around and wait to wash a unit that is still going to be violently incompatible anyway?
That's the deadly trade-off right there. You're intentionally delaying the transfusion to fix minor problems like allergies and fevers that aren't the actual thing that's going to kill the patient in the next 5 minutes.
Correct. You are painstakingly rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic while the ship is actively sinking beneath your feet. So while this fourth mindset is technically more scientifically grounded than the magic wand theory, it is still incredibly fraught with severe risk and terrible resource management issues. You are essentially trading precious time for clinical clarity, and usually in these traumas, time is the one single thing you absolutely do not have.
This whole discussion really highlights the massive communication gap between the floors, doesn't it? That moves us nicely into section 4 of our deep dive. The source specifically mentions this ongoing friction. The quote is, "We informed the treating physician." he isn't convinced.
Oh, that phrase, he isn't convinced. It is so incredibly common in the lab world, and it just makes my skin crawl a little bit every time I hear it. You have the dedicated specialist, the blood banker who studies this for a living, telling the clinical generalist, the doctor, a hard fact, a biological, undeniable fact, and the generalist just flatly rejects it because it doesn't cleanly fit into their immediate mental model of how to solve the crisis.
It really shows the extreme difficulty of explaining highly complex immunohematology concepts in the middle of a high-stress moment. You can't exactly pull out a whiteboard in the ER and calmly draw our bouncer and red shirt analogy when a patient is actively crashing and all the alarms are blaring.
No, you really can't. You can't say, hold on, doctor, let me explain the nuances of the complement cascade to you. It just doesn't work. And that is exactly why this deep dive and Sharif Abdelman's original article is just so incredibly important for the medical community. The education has to happen long before the emergency ever starts. You simply cannot teach someone how to swim when they are already actively drowning.
The call to action in the source material here is pretty clear. Sharif says we must clarify exactly what the compatibility test is for.
We absolutely have to stop thinking of the laboratory as this magic black box that just arbitrarily says yes or no based on its mood. Clinicians really need to understand what is physically being tested in those tubes. They need to understand the structural nature of the antigen on the cell surface. They need to be able to close their eyes and visualize that unchangeable red shirt.
And it's the responsibility of the blood bank specialist and, honestly, us, the listeners, as learners who now know better, to correct these lingering concepts whenever we see them. But why does it actually matter so much in the grand scheme?
I think there are two main reasons it matters. First, pure resources. We touched on this briefly with the centrifuge time. Washing and filtering are highly expensive and very time-consuming. In a chaotic, busy hospital, wasting an hour washing a unit of blood that is guaranteed to still cause a hemolytic reaction is just atrocious resource management. You are tying up critical machines and vital technicians for what is effectively a biological placebo effect. You are wasting bags of sterile saline, you are wasting expensive specialized filter sets, and you are wasting time.
And the second reason?
False hope. This is arguably the most dangerous part of all these myths.
False hope. Let's dig into that.
If a doctor genuinely truly believes that washing makes that incompatible blood safe, they might administer that transfusion with significantly less caution. They might think, oh, well, I had to lab wash it, so the risk is basically gone, I can relax a bit. That is incredibly dangerous. If they truly understand the harsh reality that the lethal risk is completely unchanged despite the washing the wear, they will monitor that patient like an absolute hawk. They will have the emergency crash cart open and ready. They will know exactly what nightmare is coming.
It's about respecting the hard biological reality of the situation. You have to look the beast dead in the eye and face exactly what you're dealing with.
You cannot negotiate with an antigen.
I really think that is going to be the absolute quote of the episode. You cannot negotiate with an antigen.
It's the truest thing in medicine. It simply doesn't care about your pressing deadlines, it doesn't care about your clinical stress, and it definitely doesn't care about your perfectly clean saline solution.
So let's wrap all of this up with a clear summary of our deep dive. We've covered a massive amount of ground today, all the way from the freezing basement of the hospital down to the microscopic surface of a single red blood cell. What are the core vital takeaways? Number one, the Crossmatch test specifically checks for antibodies attacking red blood cell antigens. It's the bouncer checking for the red shirt.
Correct.
Number two, the antigen is physically attached to the cell surface. It's the metal hood ornament of the car. It's not the loose dirt on the windshield. It is completely structural.
It's an integral part of the car itself.
Number three, washing only cleans the plasma. Filtering only removes white cells. Irradiation only zaps T cells. None of those three procedures even touch the red cell antigen.
The license plate remains bolted on.
Number four, if unit of blood is incompatible, it stays incompatible, period. Washing is not a magic wand. It is merely a physical cleaning process, not a magical transformation process.
And finally, remember that a hemolytic transfusion reaction, the patient's body violently destroying the donor cells, simply cannot be softened or reduced by cleaning the unit beforehand. The explosive fuse is on the cell itself.
Which brings us nicely to our final provocative thought for today. The source material ends with a very humble hope. Sharif writes, if any of us still held these misconceptions, hopefully this clears things up. But I really want to push that idea just a little bit further for our listeners today. We spent this whole time talking about hospital blood banks, but this exact pattern of flawed thinking, trying to use a superficial process to somehow fix a fundamental structural incompatibility, It really shows up everywhere in life, doesn't it?
Oh, it really does. I think it's just this innate human desire to try and engineer our way out of fundamental mismatches. We absolutely hate the idea of a dead end. We hate being told no.
Exactly. We want to work around. So I want to ask you, the listener, to think about this in your own life. In your own field, whatever you do for a living, what are the magic wands that people constantly ask you for? Where do your clients or your bosses or your colleagues ask you to just wash and filter a problem that is actually a fundamental flaw in the core design? Are you desperately trying to polish a product that simply doesn't fit the actual market? Are you trying to aggressively edit a PR message that fundamentally contradicts the cold, hard facts?
Sometimes no amount of careful processing can change the core identity of the thing you're actually working with. Sometimes you just have to accept the incompatibility for what it is and go find a completely different donor. Or if you can't, you have to bravely accept the massive risk for exactly what it is without hiding behind the comfortable illusion of safety.
Trust the hard science. Trust the absolute fundamentals. And whatever you do, please don't try to wash away the license plate. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into the fascinating world of blood bank myths. We'll see you next time.
Stay curious.